Good afternoon. Welcome to RAAONLINE. Today's topic is about maxillary sinus tumors or neoplasm. Here I am going to talk more in relation to squamous cell carcinoma or a malignancy of a maxillary sinus. To start with, let us go to the contents. So, we have your anatomy, what are the types of neoplasms, what will be the clinical features, how does this spread of tumor happen, and how do we diagnose it, and then we think about staging and management of this maxillary sinus neoplasms. As you know, maxillary sinus is the largest part of your maxillary sinuses compared to the rest of the sinuses. You have your frontal, ethmoidal, sphenoidal, and this is one of the largest sinuses when compared to the rest of the sinuses in the face, and it is pyramidal in shape. So, what are the walls of the maxillary sinuses? You have an anterolateral wall, you have a posterior wall, you have your superior wall, and you have your medial wall, and then you have your floor. So, what is this anterolateral wall? It is nothing but the facial surface of the maxilla. In this groove, the anterior superior alveolar nerve and its vessels to be a part of the nerve or the vessels which has got a groove in it. And the important landmark in the anterolateral wall is your canine fossa. As you know, canine fossa is the thinnest part of the maxillary sinuses, which is commonly dealt with whenever you deal with a calval look procedure or whenever you want to palpate your maxillary sinus in case of a maxillary sinusitis. And then you have your infraorbital foramen and you have your infraorbital groove as well. The posterior wall is more important, which is in relation to the infratemporal surface of the maxilla and anterior border of the pterygopalatine fossa. The significance of this is already we have talked about it, which is more important in relation to juvenile nasopharyngeal angiofibroma. And you have your superior wall, which forms the floor of the orbit, which is also containing the infraorbital groove which runs through it. And then you have your medial wall, which separates the sinuses from your nasal cavity. So, you contains your maxillary hiatus or the middle meatus opening, okay, which is articulated on the lower part by the inferior turbinate, and then you have your uncinate process of the ethmoidal bone, perpendicular plate of the palaparine bone, and the lacrimal bone and the mucosa covering your ostium. On the lateral apex, you have an extension of the zygomatic process of maxilla, where the zygoma gets attached to the maxilla, whereas the floor, which forms the alveolar and palatine process of the maxilla and lies below the nasal cavity. So, which separates the maxillary sinus floor from the oral cavity. Inferiorly, the floor of the sinus is generally thicker, but can be encroached upon by the roots of the teeth. Example, you can have your second premolar and all the other molar teeth which are attached to the floor in relation to the maxillary sinus. So, how does the maxillary sinus lined by? Usually, it is lined by ciliated pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium, and where you have more cilia in closer relation to the ostium, that is your maxillary sinus opening. And this has got the highest density of the globulate cells when compared to the rest of the sinuses. So, you have a comparatively increase in your secretions in this sinuses. So, the basic blood supply, it gets branches from your facial, maxillary, infraorbital and the greater palatine artery and its associated. So, the venous drainage is by the anterior facial vein and by the pterygoid plexus. The nerve supply is basically by the maxillary division of the trigeminal nerve, which supplies sensation via the infraorbital, superior alveolar and palatine nerves. The significance of this will be talked later on when we talk about the tumors of the maxillary sinus. Generally, the lymphatic drainage is relatively poor, and mostly it is in relation to the submandibular lymph nodes, which is quite rare because of the thick density of the bone.